Welcome to the Games Growth Podcast. This week on the podcast, we're interviewing Adam Lieb and Christian Thomas of Gamesight. Gamesight did a deep analysis of PC and console games in 2023, and we're really excited to have them on and talk to them in depth about that analysis, what it means for PC and console gamers, and how that compares and contrasts to mobile. I thought it was a really good episode. It was really interesting hearing their perspective. Adam and the team are very sharp. Warren had some nice contrast on the mobile side. Warren, what do you think?
I love this conversation. I love talking shop with Adam and Christian. The guys at Gamesight are super bright, super candid, no BS. And I thought it was a really good combination of hard data that they had around what's going on in PC games growth, as well as just sort of like the more qualitative in the trenches, what they see doing this kind of work. And I really like talking to these guys because any growth marketers, we're all spec'd a little bit differently. And like here at Upptic, like we're really high spec'd in like performance marketing, free-to-play strategies, Web3 and stuff like this. And the Gamesight guys, like they're really high-spec in things like influencer marketing and PC console. We have fewer stat points distributed there. So I think that the four voices on this podcast, we all complemented each other well, brought insights from the slightly different perspective and areas of focus that the team has. And I think there's a lot of actionable tips on this one. Like the ratio of actionable tips per minute is much higher than normal for anyone doing performance marketing on PC or console. So yeah, high value episode. Check it out. You're going to dig it. All right. Welcome to the show, everyone. Really excited for the episode this week. We have two folks from our friends at Gamesight joining. We have Adam, who's been on the show a couple times before, and Christian joining. And we wanted to join today to dig into this recent report they put together entitled Games Industry Digital Marketing Spend Analysis. I think you guys got to make that title a little more clickbaity, but the meat of this report is excellent. And I think it really ties into a few topics that Xander and I have talked about on the show a lot. Reviewing the last year, we're in the beginning of 2024, so we've done a lot of year-in review stuff lately. And it really felt like a banner year for PC and console gaming, but we haven't had a lot of hard data around that. It's just been more of like a vibe check of like, it feels like all the excitement is in that space, the game's winning awards, where player enthusiasm is. So you guys are bringing a lot of interesting hard data around this in this report, and we're keen to dig into it with you. So welcome to the show, Christian, and welcome back, Adam. Great to have you guys here.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having us. I'd say clickbait is not a skill that we have in spades here at Gamesight, so I guess I'll take that note.
Data-oriented to a fault, I think.
It's an accurate title.
Cool. Well, I think much of our audience will know who Gamesight is. We've talked about you guys ad nauseum. We recommend you for PC and console attribution as a preferred partner. But for those who don't know, Adam, do you want to just give a little bit of background about what Gamesight is and give the highlight of the company?
Sure, yeah. So Gamesight's a marketing platform built for PC and console games. We do marketing measurement. It means a bunch of things these days, but the flagship for a lot of it is digital marketing attribution. So we're connecting the dots between what's happening outside of games with marketing, community, influencer efforts, with what's happening in the games, with sales, revenue, in-game events, stuff that game companies care about. So that's the heart of the business. So we have certainly a ton of data that flows through the business. And this report is our kind of summary for the last year of where game companies and PC console space are spending their money, how that's changed year over year, what is maybe working better, what's working not quite as well, and maybe things to look forward to next year that if you're not working or if you're not trying, maybe you ought to be. So I think it's a fair summary.
Awesome. Anything to add, Christian?
We do a lot of things with the business. We have the influencer side of the business. We have creator programs that we do, the core flagship stuff, which made this report possible, the attribution side of the business. We kind of bring all of these things together to really just help game companies grow. So game developers and publishers getting their games out there, reaching the right audiences. So that's the name of the game.
Awesome. So I guess let's start at the 10,000 foot view. Let's do a very, very brief overview of what would you say is the current state of PC and console games in 2023?
Great. I would say great would be my summary. I think that the few data points I would point to have someone believe me when I say they're great is if you just look at revenue growth and you look at last year, PC gaming was the largest growth sector in gaming. Mobile shrunk, browser web stuff shrunk a lot. It's been shrinking, and console grew mildly. So PC games was the largest growth sector, and it's obviously the oldest sector of all of the gaming vertical. So it's kind of crazy to think that that's now the fastest growing, at least it was in 2023. So I think that's a big data point we look at. The stat I hear a lot is that there were the most 90 plus Metacritic score games released in 2023 than like the history of the industry. Also wild. There's a lot of counting stats kind of going up into the right every year. Number of Steam games released last year was the greatest ever, but that was also true the year before, the year before, and the year before. So some of those things are these kind of like forever trends. But I think when you just look at where money was spent last year, where gamers chose to spend money, PC did better than it has in years past. And I think more, I guess, anecdotally, if we could certainly look at the Metacritic scores, but more anecdotally, there's just like a ton of great games, and they were not all AAA premium $70 sort of flagship games. There were a bunch of those and huge ones, the Baldur's Gates and the Hogwarts Legacies and the Tears of the Kingdom, all of those types of games. But there were also so many AAA or AA games that were huge hits. There were some lethal company of an indie game made by one person that grossed $70 million. Like every part of the, I know we're all in the wrong business. Every part of the ecosystem had huge wins. So yeah, it's in a healthy place from a consumer standpoint. There's so many games to play, so many amazing games to play. The ability to make a game has never been easier, right? The cost of development from obviously the like sort of Unity type tools, maybe some of the AI tools have never been easier to make a game, but I still think distributing a game, getting a game in front of players is probably harder now than it's ever been. So when I say it's great, I definitely mean from sort of an industry health standpoint. I think from an N of one, you're a single game studio. Yeah, it's probably scary out there. There's so much competition. Breaking through the noise and being that one in, I don't know, when I think about lethal company, right? What single game developer made 70 million? It's like, well, how many games like that existed? Thousands and thousands. So, how do you be the one in several thousand? And unfortunately, the answer isn't, well, let's just go copy what somebody else did. That tends to not ever work. That would be my general state of the PC games industry.
Great. Well, in our 2023 year in review episode, I called PC the platform of the year, and our guest at the time, Mike Schmidt, yelled at me, and so I got to say, suck at Mike Schmidt.
There you go, Jada. See, I was right. Yeah.
So Adam, you just said a mouthful there, and I want to unpack some of that. So you kind of half answered my question already, but I just want to get like big picture, what were the driving factors behind this growth? And it feels like that this is product-led growth. You mentioned the average Metacritic, and we had some just like universally beloved games last year, but also just it seemed like much broader adoption of these games than normal. So it's like my headspace on it, and I'd like you to kind of either confirm or poke holes in this, is we had a disproportionate amount of great products, but also maybe there was socioeconomic conditions that caused higher adoption and more game time on PC console. And what I'm thinking of specifically is like as work from home is more normalized, very anecdotal, but I know for me, like my share of gaming time from mobile to home devices has definitely shifted more in the home device area as I'm not like either commuting or stuck in an office. So I'm just curious, like my gut read there on quality plus changing macro conditions of like how people are spending their time as driving factors. Adam and Christian, like, what do you think are the main macro factors behind this? I feel like what it's not, and I know we're going to get more into this, is that it's the industry pushing way more advertising of these products down our throats. It doesn't feel like that's the driving factor at all. But yeah, I'd love you guys to speak to kind of our assumptions of what's driving this and what you guys actually found.
I think some of those things that you're talking about were probably not best to speak on. Like, I mean, we don't do user research studies on consumer preferences and hey, gamer, are you spending more time on PC than on mobile because you're at home more? Like, I think some of those certainly have anecdotal evidence or own personal thoughts. I think from a business and data standpoint, like, I don't know that we necessarily see any of that. We do see time spent in games and game sessions and things like that. And like all of those are way up on PC. And I think one of the things this year that was surprising, and I wouldn't have probably said that at the beginning of the year, is set number of sessions and session length are up even without free-to-play games being up. Like most of the growth this year came from premium, mostly single player. Some have multiplayer elements, but like by and large, single player story-driven hit games. Those are not games that historically are like play many times for very, very long periods of time. They're like, 20, 30, 40, 60, 80 hour experiences, and then people move on. But some of these games, the depth and the amount of hours players can put in these games is so high that players are spending too much time in them. And I think that's something where when free-to-play games first started kind of becoming popular, both in mobile and PC console, there was this notion of like, well, you're giving away a game that has in hours of fun now for free. And so the consumer value is just flipped. Like, why spend $60 on a game when I can play a game that's just as fun for free? I think in some ways this year there's been more of a balancing of like, in order to have fun in a free-to-play game, and especially like a PC console one, like you're into the battle pass, maybe you're into some other type of in-game purchases that you kind of need to do to feel like you're either competitive or hanging out with your friends or your character looks cool, whatever it is. There's cost of being a free-to-play player is not zero anymore. And so now all of a sudden, well, geez, $60, $70, $80 for Hogwarts Legacy that I can put 400 hours into, all of a sudden now that feels like a great value for my money. So I think the data has sort of borne out that on those premium experiences, more time and more sessions than we've ever seen before.
Right. So on that last point, just to put a bow on it, basically saying as free-to-play economics have become more refined / aggressive, what some years back may have been, when we're looking at the value proposition versus cost, value in fun in free-to-play and call it its glory days or first era, it was hard to make that justification of the premium purchase. But now that we've pushed free-to-play monetization so aggressively, paying $60 flat is more appealing maybe than it was in the more formative years of free-to-play from the gamer standpoint. Do I have your read on that?
Yeah, certainly not universally, but definitely on the margins in certainly some of the most successful games. The amount of hours we see in a game like Baldur's Gate 3 compared to even really successful free-to-play games is just so high. People spend so much time in that game, and it's cheap. It's dirt cheap for the amount of hours, time, fun per hour. It's an incredible value.
I've got some anecdotal evidence to that as well. There's something that I've been unofficially tracking since I've started working in the games advertising space is who around me in my peer groups, either friends or family, have started picking up gaming in the last couple of years that really were not people that I would consider to be gamers before. A story, I have like every gaming console there is. My Nintendo Switch does not get enough love. It collects dust for the most part. I really only take it with me when I'm going on a trip or something like this. And within the last year or two, my wife has completely taken over that console. Like she's on it all the time, playing Animal Crossing, playing Overcooked. How much of that is marketing reaching her? I don't know, but these are high quality experiences that she sinks tons of hours into. And 3 years ago, 5 years ago, I couldn't have told you that I would have expected her to ever pick up a game like that and sink so many hours into it. I have a brother that's the same way. I mean, even my mom is on games from time to time. So there are much more high quality experiences to choose from. There is such a broad catalog of different types of games to reach different types of gamers. And I think that matters when we're talking about the growth of games as an industry.
Right. And Christian, it sounds like you're speaking to the phenomenon of people who now play video games regularly, but I assume all of those friends and family members you mentioned probably don't self-identify as gamers.
I would say so, yeah. I mean, maybe now I could probably convince my wife to say she's a gamer because we've got a Baldur's Gate 3 run through that we're playing.
There's no coming back from that one once you start hitting hard drives.
I think we have reached the point of no return on that one. But yes, for the most part, these people would not self-identify as gamers, and yet they're playing games. Like I can ask them about, how's it been playing the finals to my brother or to my mom, the games that she's playing, and like she can tell me her experience, So it's an interesting shift that I wouldn't have expected even a few years ago.
Nice. Yeah. Well, should we go from here into a little more specifics of the report, which had a focus on advertising spend for mobile and PC? And should we dig into that and maybe just starting with some of the macro trends that you guys saw around the actual digital marketing spend?
Sure. Yeah. The key trends that really showed up for us this past year when we were looking at the data were a few key things. The biggest one is that we're starting to see a lot of publishers lean more into the first party relationship with their players. So talking about account systems or email addresses, trying to secure that relationship. There are a few reasons for this. Part of it is independence. Part of it is privacy. What we're, I think, starting to see is a bifurcation in how advertising and privacy policies are going to work in the future. The one path is clean room focused solution where both sides are similarly blind to what's going on the other side, but we're still going to try to get some performance data out of this. The other side is a path where publishers and advertisers are going to own more of this relationship with their customers and players. I think for our specific advertisers, we're starting to see a lot more of them push down that path, and they've gotten a lot of incredible performance gains by owning that relationship. There's a lot you can do once you secure that relationship with the player. That was probably the biggest thing that we noticed this year. Secondary to that, there's the Twitter X story. This was something that we were really keen on seeing by the time the end of the year rolled around. Like, how did that perform? Because we see what's going on in other industries. How is that performing for games? TikTok and Reddit were also great performers in that regard. And then finally, some of the stuff that we were already covering a little bit, the retention rates for free-to-play games versus premium games in a crowded field. How would that end up looking? And this past year, it was really the case that free-to-play games suffered in that regard.
Got it. Yeah. One thing that jumped out to me in the report, the big bullet point you have up top around X, a 46% drop off in click traffic on X, reported for game marketers between 22 and 2023. There's kind of a tale of two worlds when it comes to this, because obviously we saw brand advertisers pull out of X in droves with a lot of the drama that occurred with Elon and X last year, rubbing advertisers the wrong way. The converse of that was those of us that are buying on a pure performance focus, teams like Upptic, we actually saw X performance wildly increase. It's just like the simple supply and demand, like historically X traffic had been really overpriced relative to the return on ad spend you're able to get. We haven't seen like a corresponding actual drop in user usage relative to how much advertiser buying has dropped off. So we've actually seen the arbitrage ability to do performance media buying in X is actually fantastic right now. We've mentioned this on a few episodes. So I think that's just a very interesting tale of two different worlds, depending on what people are after with their media spend and what they're measuring in their success KPIs.
Yeah, I think, Christian, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things contrary to that we saw is when the Twitter takeover happened, it became X, and there was a lot of the brand advertising pulling back. You started reading those articles that were like, 30 of the top 35 advertisers on Twitter cut or whatever. We went and looked at all of our numbers. We basically didn't see that, right? Like game companies didn't have the same, adverse reaction to that happening. Those that were spinning kind of kept spinning. And so that reduction took kind of the whole year, right? Where that I'm pretty sure was Q1 early this year. So maybe that's just delayed, but I wouldn't attribute the decrease in Twitter or X in game companies' marketing budgets to the immediate brand pullback of Elon Musk taking over, where I know that was more true in the CPG market and some of these other spaces where
got it.
That matters.
Okay.
So, possible though that it was just delayed. That they're like, oh yeah, maybe we should cut that. I don't think we ever saw it go over 1.5% of marketing budget spend. So it was never a huge player in the PC console game space. Continues to not be a huge player.
One thing to also know about that platform, the report, is a lot of this is very much performance marketing focus, and that platform in particular just doesn't have some of the same level of support for that type of marketing as like a TikTok or Reddit or a Google or Facebook. So that kind of hurts it as well. Macro trend that we've seen this year, and we'll probably get to this a little bit later on, is that a lot of marketers started flocking towards platforms where they knew that they could prove that performance either through historical data or they had support for those types of more performance marketing features for optimization around conversions, what's happening. This kind of thing is not as mature on the Twitter platform or X platform.
But it was supposed to be coming, right? I think we read lots of various blog posts about how a lot of those features were coming in, but I don't think they exist yet.
Can't confirm.
Non-mobile, I would say.